Panasonic was one of the first companies to really embrace mirrorless technology. They've been producing CSC cameras now for over 10 years, and many of their models have really helped to prove that in lots of different areas, mirrorless cameras can now rival DSLRs. But with more and more manufacturers entering this market, many of them with full frame devices, one of the challenges that the company has faced is proving to professional shooters. The Micro Four Thirds devices were able to go toe-to-toe with larger sensor devices when it comes to things like low light noise performance and the ability to produce those stylishly shallow depths of field that larger sensors can do. Well, that changes today with this, the launch of the S1 and its sibling, the S1R, two full-frame mirrorless cameras from Panasonic. I've got a prototype model here, and I'm going to be taking it out for a spin in absolutely beautiful Hallstatt. So let's talk about that new full frame sensor for a moment. This camera, the S1, has a 24.3 megapixel sensor, while the S1R is an increased resolution model, and that has a 47.3 megapixel chip. Now, if you sometimes find yourself shooting in low light conditions, perhaps you're a wedding photographer or an event photographer, this model is going to deliver the cleaner results at higher ISOs. While if you're more concerned about increased resolution in files and you've got control over your lighting perhaps, studio photographers and landscape photographers, the S1R is probably going to be better suited for you. Now, compared to the company's Micro Four Thirds sensor devices, this larger sensor is going to help its users to produce stylishly shallow depths of fields in their shots and videos, and with its 14-bit RAWs, dynamic range and image quality in general should be able to hold their own against the best of the competition. On both devices, this new sensor is paired with a new Venus engine processor. Now, I can only play with JPEGs at the moment, but already the image quality is honestly looking stunning. The ISO range on this device natively stretches from 100 to 51,200 and has an extended low of 50 and an extended high of 204,800. Now, on cameras like Panasonic's G9 and GH5, 100 was only available as an extended option, so this camera is going to make it easier to shoot in bright light conditions as well as in low lights, and should deliver some notably cleaner results across the board. When it comes to burst shooting, this camera is capable of a respectable 9 frames per second in single shot AF mode and 6 frames per second when using continuous autofocus, with the device buffering out after about 90 shots on the S1 or 40 on the S1R. Now, that's not quite as fast as some of its competition, but faster than many DSLRs, and should more than meet the demands of most shooters not specialising in either professional sports or wildlife photography. A 6K photo mode will capture images at 30 frames per second, or 4K photo mode at 60 frames per second if you need even faster burst speeds than that. With a shutter rated for over 400,000 shots, which is twice the amount quoted for the GH5 or G9, Panasonic have designed the S1 for heavy use, internally as well as externally. It also has a fast flash sync speed of 1/320th of a second and a maximum mechanical shutter speed of 1/8000th of a second. It'll also take metered shots right up to a 60-second exposure. Now, this camera has a silent shooting mode as well, and it delivers exactly what it says on the tin, truly silent shooting, for those times where even the slightest noise might upset your subject. Now, with this much larger full-frame sensor, Panasonic had no choice but to adopt a new lens mount. Though existing Micro Four Thirds mounts just wouldn't have been able to take the optics which could have resolved an image onto this sensor. But rather than developing a whole new one, what they've chose to do is to adopt Leica's OWL mount. And that means that alongside the 3 Panasonic lenses which are launching for the camera this year, the 24-105 f4, 7200 f4 and 50mm f1.4, users of this camera are going to have access to all of Leica's existing lenses and also 15 optics from Sigma, who say they're going to adapt them for this system this year. Now, that means that straight out of the gate, people that buy this camera are going to have access to almost 30 lenses, which for a brand new system and a brand new lens mount, or at least new to Panasonic, is seriously impressive. 30 optics in the first year alone. I mean, I don't think any other system has ever done that quickly. when it comes to the S1's autofocus system, Panasonic might catch a few people off guard. They've decided to stick with their contrast detect autofocus system with depth from defocus technology, a bit like in their Micro Four Thirds devices, while most of the rivals are either using phase or a hybrid focus system. Now, that's not too much of a concern for this brand, because on their Micro Four Thirds cameras it's both fast and accurate, and it certainly seems to be a similar case on this. And impressively, it will continue to operate down to -6 EV. Now, to put that into perspective, light levels as low as -6 EV are pretty much starlight, and it wasn't too many years ago that we were claiming -3 EV performance as truly game-changing. The brand have also been quick to point out that with the deep learning that its AF system has, it's extremely good at picking out and tracking both human and animal subjects. And from my testing here today, probably helicopters too. Some of the other nice focusing features which this camera has are focus peaking, focus switching when moving the camera between portrait and landscape orientation, and that 8-direction focus lever on the back of the device. Now, just about every mirrorless camera on the market now has a decent image stabilization system built into it, and the S1 is no different. Its dual IS stabilization system makes use of both sensor and lens-based stabilization, and it can compensate for up to 6 stops of shake, which is pretty impressive. And that means if you're handheld shooting and using slow shutter speeds, or perhaps you're using a telephoto lens and hand supporting it, or maybe you're just shivering a little bit like me here in this cold, it's going to do a really good job of ensuring that you still get sharp shots. Now, the S1 is obviously not the most compact mirrorless camera that's ever been made. It's very much a professional device that feels like it's targeted at the kind of people who would previously have used a DSLR. It weighs around 1.25 kilograms with the battery fitted, but it feels really durable in the hand. It's freeze-proof down to -10, which is going to be a massive help here. It's also dust-proof and weather-resistant. Battery life is around 380 shots with no energy saving options turned on, but if you activate all those options, it's going to be extended to a much more impressive 1,150 shots. The device has 2 card slots, one XQD which will support CF Express, and one SD that is V90 compatible. Of course, there's all the standard options to use the second card slot as a backup or overspill. Now, one of the standout points on this camera is its 5.7 million pixel EVF, and it's extremely clear. With a maximum 120 frames per second refresh rate and a 0.005 second lag, it's very, very responsive. Now, mirrorless cameras have really reached the point now where, in my opinion, most people will enjoy the benefits of an EVF more than they'll ever miss an optical finder. This viewfinder is paired with a 3.2-inch 2.1 million dot RGBW touchscreen display, which again is nice and clear. It can be flipped up and down and to the right thanks to a tri-axle design that, while not quite as flexible as a true vari-angle display, does allow much more convenient use at high and low shooting angles. Wi-Fi and Bluetooth are both built in for remote transfer of images and control of basic camera features. Alongside the standard image capture and burst shooting features that the S1 offers are a high-resolution shot mode and a HLG photo option. The high-resolution shot mode, as seen previously in devices like the Lumix G9, quickly shifts the sensor slightly using the device's image stabilization system for 8 consecutive but slightly adjusted shots that are then synthesized into a single image with an increased resolution. In the S1's case, this produces 96 megapixel images, while the S1R it's 187 megapixel images. The HLG photo option I mentioned allows the user to shoot HDR images which will have a greater dynamic range with more information captured in highlights and shadows and saved as a HSP file. Now, one part of the mirrorless market that Panasonic has always done really well in is selling their cameras to independent filmmakers and videographers. Cameras like the GH5S and GH5 had really fine-tuned feature sets that really met their needs. And while this camera isn't targeted at them in quite the same way, it does still have a really nicely rounded feature set for those that are looking to record video. At the forefront of that is UHD 4K at up to 60 frames per second in 420 8-bit recording at 150 megabits per second. There's also full pixel readout making the most of that full frame sensor and an unlimited recording time. UHD 4K at 30 frames per second, but in 420 10-bit is also available in HEVC at 72 megabits per second. Full HD is available at frame rates of up to 180 frames per second for 6 times slow motion at 30 frames per second playback. It's a very competitive set of video formats, if not quite on par with the GH5. There's a 3.5mm headphone socket for audio monitoring and a 3.5mm input for an external microphone. The camera is also compatible with Panasonic's XLR1 microphone adapter, available separately, featuring 2 XLR inputs and connecting to the camera directly through its hot shoe, while providing control of gain and other features. Now, with the S1 and the S1R, Panasonic set out to prove that it could create a full-frame mirrorless camera that would be really appealing to professional still shooters, and I think they've pretty much achieved it with this device. Image quality seems to be very good indeed from my first impressions. Features like the video features are very competitive within the market, and the EVF is the best that I've ever used. With over 30 lenses which are going to be available for it by the end of the year, this is going to be an extremely tempting proposition for Micro Four Thirds users looking to upgrade to something a little bit more advanced, or perhaps to those that were previously using DSLRs and are now looking for a professional mirrorless system. For more information about the S1, visit lcegroup.co.uk.